This really happened to me, and I wish it hadn't. I'm an older woman from Seattle, and as much as I love telling stories, this one is a bruise I had to learn to press if I wanted it to heal. My daughter-in-law hid my phone, slipping it behind the yellow Pyrex mixing bowl on my Queen Anne kitchen counter while everyone gathered for my birthday dinner. The oven timer chimed, the roast chicken hissed in its own juice, and Lucas, my son, asked where I'd put my phone this time, with that careful tone people use when they're trying not to embarrass the elderly. Taryn, my daughter-in-law, smiled without showing her teeth and said, "We can manage without it," just as the Nest Hub on the shelf glowed like an eye that saw everything. I pretended to fuss over the salad tongs while the sting rose in my throat, because in that bright little kitchen with the view toward Cary Park, I realized I was about to be made the unreliable one in my own home on my 63rd birthday. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. Lucas had brought a caramel cake from Bakery Nouveau. My sister Nora called in on the Nest for a video hello from Boise. They could all see and hear each other through that glossy rectangle. My oldest friend, Denise, set out the plates. And while I carved the chicken with my hands trembling, I could feel the tiniest vibrations somewhere under the clatter and laughter, as if a bee had been sealed in a jar. I kept telling myself not to be dramatic, not to look under the Pyrex bowl like a wretched raccoon. When the toast began, Lucas raising his glass, sweet and awkward, blessing the kindest mom in the Pacific Northwest, Taryn chimed in, "And the most independent." The pause before the last word was a fingernail on a chalkboard. Everybody laughed politely. It was all so civilized you could forget how cruelty prefers a linen tablecloth. I found my phone later, after everyone had hugged me in a halo of wine and candle smoke and city lights. It was face down behind the bowl, right where I'd seen Taryn's hand drift earlier. When I picked it up, the screen lit and showed 6 missed calls from an unknown number. A bank fraud department had left voicemails about password reset attempts on my checking account. The little bee in the jar turned into a hornet. What I remember most from that night, apart from the caramel icing and the way the rain freckled the window, is the shutting door. When Lucas and Taryn left, he hugged me tight, but she stepped ahead and opened the door like the hostess dismissing a guest. "You should get one of those Apple AirTags for your phone, Marian," she said. "They're great for people who misplace things." It was syrupy, a drip that sticks. I stood in the kitchen after they went, staring at the Pyrex bowl. The Nest Hub screen was dark, but it felt like a blank page daring me to write the truth on it. I listened to the voicemails, wrote down the case number, and waited for morning. When you get older, you learn that some battles begin on the quiet side of midnight, and the first move is not to run, not to rage, but to sit and breathe until the indignity stops feeling like your fault. Only then can you start to see what's really happening, whose hands touched the bowl, and why the bee was buzzing. In the morning, I called the bank. The agent at Beckyou said someone had tried to reset my online login 3 times around 6 in the evening, just when I was finishing the salad dressing. "We flagged it and froze your access, Ms. Hale," the woman said, gentle and firm. "You'll need to come in with ID." I walked down to the branch near Mercer and First, and past the same tulip stand where I'd bought flowers earlier that day. Everything was ordinary enough to make you question your mind. It's an old trick, weaponized normalcy. When the supposed problem is you, you stop trusting your memory, your senses, your every twitch and instinct. For a week, little things went missing. My keys migrated from their hooks to the bottom of a laundry basket. A kitchen drawer I never lock clicked shut. I told no one. I didn't want to feed the story being built around me, how I was scatterbrained, how grief had softened me since my husband Tom died. Yet I noticed Taryn watching me like a scientist observing a lab mouse. At Sunday dinner at their Ballard townhouse, she slid a pen across the table while Lucas fetched the takeout from the pink door and said, "You know, Mom, We should get you a medical directive in place, just for peace of mind." She smiled at the word peace, as if I were a border that needed guarding. "I already have one," I said, and held her gaze. "Filed at Virginia Mason when Tom was sick." "Oh," she withdrew the pen. "Well, we could update it. Laws change." "Not that much," I said. I smiled. She smiled back, 2 doors closed with polite plaques on them. That night, I went home and did something I'd never done. I downloaded the app for my Wise Cam, the old one I used to aim at the back door when we had a raccoon problem, and set it up in the bookshelf with the trinkets and framed photos. I let the little camera's eye look across my living room toward the kitchen, the Nest Hub, and that cursed Pyrex bowl like a sun on a yellow day. I told myself it was for peace of mind, not a war. But war knows when it's been declared. You feel it in your gums, a tiny pulse. 2 days later, I hosted book club. We're not fancy, librarians, nurses, a retired ferry worker from Bainbridge, but we love stories and cake. Taryn joined that night because the novel was one she'd picked, a thriller about a woman accused of losing her mind. We laughed as I poured coffee. Several times I happened to sprinkle a little extra sugar. I happened to turn my back on my phone resting by the stove. I happened to leave the bowl right where a bad idea might bloom. After everyone left, except Taryn, who lingered to help, I went upstairs, remembering a sweater. From the landing, I could see just enough. Taryn's hand slid the phone behind the Pyrex bowl. Then she straightened like a cat pretending not to have knocked something off the counter. I took 2 more steps so the Wise Cam would pick up the angle toward the kitchen. Then I went back down. "Silly me," I said, and smiled. "I keep misplacing everything." "You do," she said kindly, so kindly it hurt, and kissed my cheek. By the time the door closed behind her, my cheeks were dry. I sat in the dark and rewound the footage. I watched her glance at the camera and calculate that it pointed only at the living room. I watched her fingers slip behind the bowl. I watched her check the door, the windows, her reflection. "Guardianship," she murmured once, as if trying the word on her tongue while she tidied the mail. And then, in a whisper so thin I had to press my ear near the laptop, she said, "I can't keep doing this if Lucas won't listen. There has to be a judge to make it official." My breath snagged. A judge. She wasn't stealing my phone to be petty. She was building a case where my forgetfulness would become a roadmap to my house. I tilted my head toward the Nest Hub's dark screen. The bee in the jar had found its way out. The sound from the little Wise speaker was small, but the truth was loud. I could feel the house breathing with me as I pressed pause, my finger hovering over the space bar, as if it might also pause time. And that's when I saw it, her other hand, quick and sly, slipping something into her coat pocket as she left. A spare key. Mine. I didn't sleep. I made tea and watched the city lights blink across Elliott Bay and thought of Tom, who would have picked up a hammer and a lawyer in the same day. Instead, I made lists. Names of people who knew me, an attorney's number Denise had once given me, for her friend who handled estates and elder law, a detective's email a neighbor had mentioned when we set up our block watch, the Nest app open on my phone, the Home app too. I created a speaker group called All Rooms and added the minis I had upstairs and the old Chromecast in the den. I gave it a test and listened as a melancholy jazz playlist rippled softly through the air. For a moment, everything felt gentle again. Then I pressed stop, and the house went back to holding its breath with me, waiting for the next move I had to make, because Taryn had already made hers, and the next attempt might arrive with a clipboard and a smile on legal letterhead. When the official letter came, it was a draft, a proposed guardianship petition, stuffed into the mailbox like a coupon flyer. It wasn't filed yet, but it was a threat dressed as compassion. We are concerned that Ms. Marian Hale's increasing memory lapses create unsafe conditions. It listed incidents, misplaced keys, forgotten stove burners, a lie, missed banking passwords, a half-truth with a wrong story attached. At the end, it suggested consideration of power of attorney and a temporary property custodian, my son's wife. The letter named the King County Superior Court and even penciled in a tentative date. In friendly confidence, it read, "We'll need family support." I called Denise. "Meet me at Top Pot on 5th, I said. "Bring a pen." Then I called the lawyer. The attorney's office was in a brick building downtown, a block from the old Bon Marché, now Macy's, and I love that kind of old Seattle seam where the past and present are stitched together. Emily Cates had a calm voice and a delicate way of spelling out what the law could do. "Guardianship is drastic," she told me over a table with 2 glasses of water. "It's hard to obtain without documented incapacity, but people try to use it. The tactic you're describing, creating a pattern of concern, is elder abuse. The law knows that term. So do detectives." "I have video," I said, and showed her the Wise footage. Emily watched Taryn's hand disappear behind the bowl and reappear with clean, empty fingers. "Keep collecting," Emily said. "Don't confront her yet, and secure your accounts. We'll update your trust and make sure your house can't be touched without your say-so. Meanwhile, we'll quietly let Detective Nguyen know what's happening." I walked back home past the monorail's steel spine and the Space Needle shining like a candlestick in fog. The city was doing its thing, pretending it hadn't seen any of this before, pretending everything was a drizzle that would dry. I fussed with the house again, reset the smart locks, hid the real spare key in a taped-up envelope in the freezer, turned on 2-factor authentication for everything. At night, I lay in bed and listened, trying to decide if the faraway hum I heard was traffic on 99 or the story Taryn was writing for me turning pages. Finally, I sat up, opened voice memos on my iPhone, and recorded what I knew, in my own voice, for myself. "This is real," I said softly. "This is happening to me." When I looked up, the Nest Mini on my dresser had a faint blue halo. I watched it like a lighthouse and planned how to make it speak for me when I needed it most. The next time Taryn visited, it was a week later. Lucas was out, "Stuck at the office," he texted, and I tried not to hate his job that kept him from my eyes. Taryn offered to bring groceries from PCC on Westlake. She arrived with a tote and a judicious hum, as if this were a favor performed for a neighbor. She talked about Instagram reels and the book club girls, and a class she might take in nonprofit management. I brewed coffee. I told stories. Everything was almost normal, like a sweater that still fits but feels wrong at the shoulder seam. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. I feigned surprise and stepped away to check the oven. When I came back, it was gone. "Have you seen my phone?" I said, bright and clueless, as if the words were helium balloons. Taryn widened her eyes and shook her head. "Oh, Marian, again?" "I know," I said with a rueful laugh. "I'm hopeless." She patted my shoulder. "You're not hopeless. You just need help." I wanted to spit. Instead, I poured her another coffee and told her I'd go upstairs to get a sweater, like last time. I stood on the landing where the Wise would catch both the kitchen and the edge of the hall. Taryn looked around, quick and almost bored, like a shoplifter who knows the clerks are on break. She slid the phone behind the Pyrex bowl. Then she did something new. She took a call and lifted the phone to the speaker like a teenager telling secrets. "Bree, listen," she whispered. "I did it again. She's losing it. Lucas will have to admit it soon." She giggled, and the sound made the hair on my arms lift. "No, she's sweet, like a lamb. But nobody lets a lamb run the farm. If a judge signs off, we're golden. The house? It's got that view. You've seen it. We could Airbnb the bottom floor." She laughed again, delighted with herself. "I didn't just hide it, Bree. I wanted Lucas to see his mom unravel." I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I watched Taryn tuck a crumb into her mouth like a communion wafer, then adjust the bowl so its edge was just a hair over the phone. When she left, she kissed my cheek. I counted to 30 before I ran down, grabbed the phone, and stopped the recording in my chest that had become my heart. I played back enough to know that the camera had caught her voice in full, clear as a glass bell. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry and didn't hide it. The next day, Detective Nguyen called from the West Precinct. "I can't promise outcomes," he said, "but this is good, Ms. Hale. Keep doing what you're doing. Document. Let your lawyer handle the legal offense, and we'll consult. Do not confront unless you must. You're doing fine." He sounded young but competent, a quality I've learned to trust more than bravado. I walked down to Cary Park and watched the ferries slice the water like coins. People took photos. A busker played Blackbird on a soft guitar. I sat on the bench and realized I could do this. It didn't matter how old I was. Knowing where to put the camera and the bowl and my fear was its own kind of strength. I made a plan. Everything in me wants to tell you I stumbled into it, that my age excused my cunning. But the truth is, I chose it. I counted the speakers in my house, 2 minis upstairs, the hub in the kitchen, the Chromecast in the den, and Lucas had a Nest. In his living room, that often auto-connected to my home app because we'd once set up a shared routine when he fixed my Wi-Fi. I recorded a clean copy of Taryn's call on voice memos. I exported it to my laptop and edited just enough to make the beginning and end crisp. No trickery beyond a neat bow on the truth. I saved it with a name I'd never forget, bowlbell.wav. I scheduled Thanksgiving at my place. Taryn offered, all honey and rosemary, but I insisted. "It'll be small," I said. "Just us and Denise and my neighbor Asha. Something cozy." She agreed. People always agree to the trap they think they've built. The night before Thanksgiving, a courier arrived with a thick envelope, a second draft petition with my name and case number typed in bold, and a friendly note from a paralegal at a law office in South Lake Union asking if I needed assistance gathering medical records. I called Emily, who exhaled a lawyer's exhale, and said, "They're testing boundaries. We'll file a notice of appearance so all communication comes through me. And Marian, if you're going to do what I suspect you're going to do tomorrow, make sure your audio is saved in 3 places." "It's already saved in 4, I said, and I could hear her smile through the line. Thanksgiving Day dawned with that cool pewter sky Seattle wears like a cardigan. I bought a pie from Macrina and made cranberry relish in my yellow Pyrex bowl, the edge still wet from a fast wash. I set the table with Tom's mother's china. I set my phone to Do Not Disturb and plugged it into the charger, and then I hid my real spare phone on a shelf where the wise could see everything. The Nest Hub blinked awake when I brushed it, like a cat pleased to be noticed. I whispered to the house, "You ready?" The blue rings glowed, and I took that as a yes. They arrived in a flurry of scarves and grocery bags and small talk. Lucas hugged me, and my bones thawed. Taryn kissed my cheek and gave the air a sniff. "Did you forget the sage, Marian?" she asked, teasing as she drifted toward the kitchen. "I can run to QFC." "It's there," I said. "We're all set." We weren't all set, of course. We were a chessboard about to sing. Dinner was good until it wasn't, until the moment you're waiting for erupts through the gravy boat like a volcano of clarity. The Macy's parade murmured from the den. Denise and Asha were in the living room discussing the lawless glory days of Bumbershoot. Taryn fluttered around the kitchen. Twice she looked at the Pyrex bowl and then at me, testing. My phone, the decoy, sat bright as a coin beside it. "Where's your phone, Mom?" she called out finally, big and cheerful, as if that line were a cue for someone to bring in the cake. "We should take a family picture." I had the carving knife in my hand and an entire life behind me. "Right there," I said, pointing. "Right. By the bowl." She didn't pick it up. She leaned against the counter and looked at me for a breath, calculating. Then she called out, "Lucas, do you remember the time we—" "Oh, never mind." She slipped the phone behind the bowl with the same movement you'd use to flick a bug off a napkin. She didn't even bother to be delicate. Why should she? The story said I was the forgetful one. I wiped my hands on a towel. "Lucas," I said, Would you help me get the wine? He followed me to the pantry, the small room with the old Frigidaire where sound from the living room muddles. I handed him a bottle and looked him in the eye. I love you, I said, which isn't a normal sentence for the pantry, and his face creased with worry. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, remember that. My voice broke, and I let it. Then I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my True phone from where I'd stashed it behind the cookbooks, and opened the home app. The All Rooms group glowed like a ready chorus. I hit cast. A chime fluttered through the house, the same clean tone that normally announces the weather or a timer. Then, from the Nest Hub in the kitchen, from the Mini in the hallway, from the tiny speaker in my bedroom, and the Chromecast in the den, my house breathed in, woke up, and began to speak with Taryn's voice. I did it again, she said, intimate and tinny and everywhere, as the first line of the recording lit up the air like a match in a dark theater. She's losing it. Lucas will have to admit it soon. The forks froze. Denise stopped mid-laugh. Lucas turned so fast his knee hit the chair. Taryn went still. It is something to watch guilt recognize itself in the mirror of sound. Her eyes widened, and the color climbed her neck. Stop it, she said reflexively, and reached for the hub. The minis in the other rooms kept talking. If a judge signs off, we're golden. The house? It's got that view. Taryn yanked the power cord on the hub. The speakers in the other rooms carried on, her voice as unstoppable as the tide. We could Airbnb the bottom floor. She was panting now, real fear blooming. She ran to the hall and pulled the plug on the Mini. The den's TV bloomed with her words, the Chromecast obliging a truth it couldn't know it served. I didn't just hide it, Bree. I wanted Lucas to see his mom unravel. Lucas's face changed. It doesn't take long. Denial is a dancer, nimble and quick, but it can't stand under a floodlight forever. He looked at me, then at the bowl, then at Taryn, then at the nearest speaker, as if it were a person who had betrayed him too. What is this? He asked Taryn softly, as if any sudden movement might make the last kind version of her shatter. She stammered. It's edited. She edited it. She pointed at me. I felt older than my bones and stronger than the house. The second part of the recording began, the part where Taryn said the words she had meant to be a prayer to Greed and had become her confession. Guardianship, past Taryn said, breathy and certain. There has to be a judge to make it official. Denise put a hand over her mouth. Asha whispered, Oh, Marian. The house was alive with voice. The walls, the hall, the bedroom like a choir. Taryn lunged for the den and tore the Chromecast from the HDMI port, her hands shaking. The speakers went quiet, finally, like sparrows taking off in the same second. The silence that followed was not relief. It was an arena. Lucas set down his glass very gently. Did you hide her phone, Taryn? She swallowed. It was a joke. A joke. His voice had the speed of a coming storm, a low rumble drawn across the sound. I was trying to show you she needs help. What you showed me is that she needs help because of you, he said. You used her phone to push a narrative about my mother. He said the last two words like a benediction and a blade. Taryn turned to me, suddenly performing contrition. I'm sorry, Marian, she said, starting to cry. I got carried away. It was just, everyone knows you've been under stress. I thought if you had support handling things. Support is when you hold your hand out, I said. This was a shove. She stepped forward as if to embrace me. I stepped back. Leave, I said. Lucas, she begged. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were Tom's eyes. Go, he said. She left with little rustles and hiccups, grabbing her coat, her bag, knocking a spoon askew. The door didn't slam. It clicked. We all stood very still until Denise made a sound like a kettle reaching boil and put her arms around me. Asha murmured, I'll help with the dishes, and began moving plates with that efficient compassion of women who've seen kitchens after storms. Lucas didn't hug me. He leaned on the counter and cried into the crook of his arm. I went to him because I'm his mother, and even when his wife had been methodically unmothering me, he had been mine. The next hours were long and careful. We ate what we could. We sat in the living room and played the recording again, not on the speakers, but softly, through my phone, while Lucas read the letter from the paralegal with the legalese that had looked like friendship. He took photos of everything, and then asked me for Emily's number. His hands were steady, and then not. Finally, he stood. "I have to go home," he said. "I have to see what else is in our house." He texted me updates like punctures in the dark, an envelope of printed emails between Taryn and Bree, referencing jurisdiction, a saved draft for a guardianship petition in their printer queue, a handwritten list in Taryn's notebook with the heading Evidence. At the bottom, Marian's house? Access? Keys? He sent a photo of my missing spare, labeled with tape, and my neat handwriting, photographed somewhere on their kitchen island. Seeing my own script in their light nearly knocked me to the floor. The next morning, Emily filed a notice of representation and a formal letter to that South Lake Union firm. She called Detective Nguyen, who asked me to come by. I brought the Wise footage, my phone with the cast logs, and a printed transcript of the audio. "You did good," he said. "You kept cool. You documented. If I could teach a class, I'd use this story." He meant it as comfort. I took it as fuel. That afternoon, Lucas called. He was at the Starbucks near his office in Pioneer Square. "I spoke to a divorce lawyer," he said, and the words fell like lead shot. "Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to believe the best. I always will. But I listened to that recording 10 times, and every time it's the same woman I've lived with, certain she knew better than everyone, certain she could bend the truth until it made a shape she liked. I'll make it right." "Just make it true," I said. The weeks that followed were a corridor. On one side, Emily walked with me, filing papers, updating my trust, so the house sat in a vault that Taryn's hands couldn't touch. On the other side, the detective walked with us, inquiring, emailing, forwarding things to the prosecutor's office. In the middle was Lucas, carrying the bruised fruit of his marriage. Holidays arrived like a parade that didn't care about your troubles. I bought a small tree at the lot by the Safeway on First and tucked it in the corner. The house felt alert, not festive, but it was still mine. I played a little jazz through the speakers just to remind them they weren't only for war. One night in early December, an envelope came without a return address. Inside was a printout of a thread from a neighborhood Facebook group with my name highlighted. "Anyone know this woman?" Someone had posted under my photo from book club. "She seems lost." The date was back in October, the day after my birthday dinner. The comments were a small parade of pity and accusation. I recognized the profile of the original poster, Bree. I folded the paper in half and then in half again until it was small enough to swallow if I were that kind of woman. I called Emily. "I want it all to stop," I said. "I don't care about punishment. I care about quiet." "Quiet comes," she said. "Sometimes it comes after a noise you have to make." 2 days later, the prosecutor's office called to say they weren't filing charges yet. "We have the confession," the assistant said kindly. "We need to see intent beyond humiliation. Keep documenting." I thanked her and hung up, feeling both relieved and cheated. Didn't the truth deserve handcuffs? Then I made tea and thought of the time I taught second graders to read, how we'd clap out syllables with gusto, and then, when the applause stopped, the sound the room made was approval anyway. Justice could be like that, more silence than spectacle. That night, Taryn texted me. It lit up my phone like a mosquito. "Can we talk?" She followed it with, "Woman to woman." I stared at it, then at the yellow bowl, then at the blue ring on the Mini. I wrote back, "Come at 7. Lucas will be here." She sent a thumbs up. I felt like I'd invited a fox to a lecture on chicken safety. She arrived in a sweater I'd once complimented and a face that could have sold spring water to a river. Lucas was already at the table, his hands folded like a church he no longer attended. Taryn sat without being asked. "Marian," she began, "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt—" "You wanted a house," I said. "You wanted me located in the story as the problem so that the solution you preferred would look like mercy." She blinked. "That's very literary." "I used to teach children how to read subtext," I said. "I can still read it." "I'll apologize publicly," she said, "to your book club, to the Facebook group, to anyone you want, if we can just keep this out of court." Lucas stared at his hands. "It's already in court," he said. "It's not criminal," she snapped, and there she was, the real person, peeking out like a wolf through a shawl. "It's domestic." "It's both when you mess with someone's bank accounts," I said. "It's both when you forge drafts on letterhead." She looked startled. "Those were just templates." "Templates can be weapons," I said. "I could ruin you," she hissed suddenly, quietly. "You think this recording exonerates you? It makes you look paranoid. Everyone loves a story about a crazy mother-in-law." "Everyone," I said, "loves a story where the truth plays on every speaker." She flinched. Lucas stood and walked to the window, as if the glass could give him a version of the city without what was happening behind him. Taryn stared at me a long time. "You're old," she said finally, cruel and simple. "You're going to die, and your son will have nothing but this house." "Then he'll have a roof," I said, and smiled, which is sometimes the only weapon that doesn't draw blood. She left with a small door click, like punctuation. Lucas leaned his head against the window. "I married a hurricane," he said. "I'm sorry I didn't notice the weather sooner." The divorce moved forward like trucks, loud, deliberate, not elegant, effective. Taryn posted a long plaintive message on social media about family misunderstandings. Some believed her, some didn't. The book club girls sent me a bouquet delivered by a courier on a bicycle who looked like a college poem. Denise baked. Asha checked my locks again and again, like a guardian angel with a key ring. I walked to Volunteer Park and sat under the cedars and told Tom out loud what had happened, and the wind answered with a dry hush. Once, in the QFC cereal aisle, Bree appeared like an ill-timed ad and said, without preamble, "I didn't know it would go that far." I said nothing, because there's a point at which nothing is the most articulate answer. In January, Lucas and I had to go to King County Superior Court, not for guardianship, God spare me, but for a hearing in the divorce case where evidence would be sealed and arranged. The courthouse is a bureaucratic cathedral, all marble and echoes, and people keeping their heads down. We sat on a bench outside the courtroom. Taryn arrived in a coat that made her look expensive and invulnerable. She glanced at me, and then away. If you've never watched someone who tried to erase you have to stand within your outline, you don't know the quiet intimacy of it. I put a hand on Lucas's shoulder. He didn't look at me, but he was looking because I was looking. It's something mothers do. It's something houses do, too, if you let them. Inside, the judge had a voice like a librarian and a way of moving papers that said she'd seen worse and better. The lawyers talked. The audio was referenced. The wise footage was referenced. The letterhead templates were referenced. Taryn's attorney tried to argue that the recording was out of context. "Play it," the judge said, and we all listened to Taryn's small, bright cruelty fill the air of a room designed to hold anything without cracking. When it was over, the judge didn't look at me or at Lucas. She looked at Taryn. "I suggest you consider the difference between care and control," she said mildly, "for your own sake." She set a date for continued proceedings, and we filed out into the hallway where strangers passed us like we were any three people with any three tragedies. At home that evening, I made soup. I turned on the speakers to a local jazz station, and the horn line looped softly through the rooms, the sound of something practiced and honest. I sat with my bowl, blue this time, and let the steam curl my hairline. The house was itself again, a place for doors closing and opening, for forks and pen caps, for laughter and sleep. The Nest Hub showed photos of our trip to the Hoh rainforest from years ago, Tom grinning under a fern so big it looked like it needed a name. I thought of the night my house had sung her confession and wondered what the walls remembered. A week later, she tried once more. That's the thing about some people. They don't bow, they regroup. I was washing dishes. The window was black with winter. A motion alert chimed on my phone. The camera by the porch showed a figure on my steps in a parka, hood up. I moved to the door and called out before she could knock. "Don't," I said. "Don't touch my house." Taryn lowered her hood. Her eyes were red. "Please," she said. "One last time. Please say you won't push for charges." "I'm not pushing for anything," I said. "I'm telling the truth as it happens." "It'll ruin me," she said. "Then you ruined you," I said gently. "And you can unruin yourself by doing the hard thing instead of the easy one. Apologize. Stop. Leave us alone." She stared at me, and for a second I saw the small girl she must have been, rehearsing arguments in a mirror. Then she squared her shoulders, and the small girl went away. "You don't get to win," she said, and stabbed a finger at me. "Not because you're old and nice. You don't get to win because you thought of using speakers like an army." "I didn't win," I said. "I survived." She laughed once, like a cough, then turned and walked down the steps into the night. I watched until she was streetlight, then shadow, then another motion alert I didn't need to watch. In February, the prosecutor's office called again. "We're not filing," the woman said gently. "We'll log it. The family court seems to be handling the underlying issues. With your permission, we'll note that you remain in contact in case of escalation." "I understand," I said, and I did. The sound of not filing was like a door closing softly. It didn't slam, it clicked. Lucas came over that evening with flowers. He fixed the crooked cabinet door that had been bugging me since June, and he took a photo of the yellow bowl on the counter and set it as my contact photo for him. "So you'll always see the villain," he joked, then winced. "I mean the hero. I mean the prop that betrayed you and saved you." "It's just a bowl," I said. "It holds what you put in." He looked at me a long time. "I'm going to therapy," he said. "I think that's what I can hold right now." "Good," I said. In March, we signed some papers at Emily's office that made the house safer than a secret. I added Denise and Asha as emergency contacts. I changed the batteries in everything that beeped. I replaced the Wise with a newer model that did its job without fuss. I went to Canlis with Denise to celebrate her retirement, and when the pianist played something smooth, I cried for no reason and every reason. Denise squeezed my hand. "You did it," she said, not meaning the dinner reservation. "What remains of Taryn is a file and some photos. Sometimes I see her at a distance on Queen Anne Avenue, and we do the dance of people who used to share a table and now share a city. Once she was at Metropolitan Market, and when our carts came close, we curved away like magnets. She wore a different coat, and I wore my hair down for the first time in months. A girl at the register asked if I had any plans for the weekend. "I'm going to listen to my house," I said, and she laughed, thinking I was being whimsical. There's a thing you learn when you live alone in a house, smart enough to talk. The quiet is different after it has been filled with a dangerous voice. You don't need a court date for that. You don't need a police report. You need a chair and a cup of tea and a body you still trust. Sometimes at night, I play the radio very low, and when the host announces the time and the weather, I say, "Thank you," and mean it. I tell the house good night like an old friend. I touch the yellow bowl and use it for mashed potatoes, muffins, the stupidly good cranberry relish that stains my fingertips. The people I love come over. Lucas brings flowers from Pike Place and sets them on the table. Denise brings gossip. Asha brings tart lemons from a tree her sister keeps in a pot. We set our phones on the counter in a neat row like obedient birds. We laugh about nothing and everything. From time to time, someone asks about Taryn, and I say, she's in the past participle, which makes the women laugh until they snort. The men in our lives don't always get the grammar of survival. That's okay. We can teach. One night in early spring, the house did something it hadn't done since Thanksgiving. I was walking down the hall, and the minis lit with a blue breath. "What is it?" I asked aloud, half silly. The lights dimmed and then went still. The house had nothing to say. It was enough. The confession that once poured through the speakers had calcified into architecture, a strengthening beam that no one could see, but that held the roof. I want to tell you that the end of this story held a court verdict, a headline, a metaphoric check in the mail. That's not how the truth sometimes pays. The cruel are clever, not always criminal. The brave are steady, not often loud. I put away the audio file, but I didn't delete it. It lives where my will lives, and my passwords live, and the spare key in the freezer lives. Once in a while, when the city is a black mirror and I want to remember what I know, I play just 2 seconds of it, the part where she says, "I did it again," and then I stop, because I don't have to hear the rest to know how it ends. This really happened to me. The night it happened, my smart home spoke the truth in a chorus across every room, and the echo hasn't left the rafters yet. When I turn out the lights, the quiet that remains has a weight to it, like a hand resting on my shoulder to say, "I'm here," the way Tom used to in the dark, the way the truth did when it found a microphone. And sometimes just before sleep, I still hear it. Not her voice, not the buzz of a trapped bee, but the smallest, kindest sound. A house satisfied that it did what houses are built to do: hold what's precious, play back what's real, and keep the wolves outside the door. The end.